In this tutorial, we use geometry nodes to create this interesting Nike animation. Let's view the animation. And obviously, if I change the camera angle, you might get a more interesting view, but you get the idea. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Alright, the first thing you want to do is select your default cube and rename it. We're going to call this your geo node. And we're going to right click new collection and put your geo node into collection 2. Then we're going to press tab to go into edit mode, X to delete and delete all the vertices. Press tab to go into object mode, then press shift A, mesh, and we're going to use a grid, which is essentially a type of plane that you can modify slightly differently from the start. So we're going to put this on 100, 100, and we're going to make it 5 meters thick, and that's looking great. Once we've done that, we're going to take our grid and put it in collection 2 as well, and then we're going to press shift A, mesh, and we're going to use a UV sphere in this example. Right click, shade smooth, S 0.025, enter, and we've got a tiny sphere over here. But for this to work properly, when you're working with geometry nodes, you have to press Ctrl A and apply that scale, and then press G1. We're just going to move it down this y-axis out of the scene to over there somewhere, as you can see. Alright, now we're ready to begin. First thing we want to do is lift this all the way up over here, go over here, bring this down, and change this to our geometry node editor. Select your geo node, and now we have our viewport, our timeline, and our geometry node editor. We'll press new with our geo node selected, and we'll select our group input, X to delete it, shift A, input, and we'll start off with a object info node, and we'll connect this object info node into the geometry group output node. And we want to use the grid, and then we're going to press shift A just to show you what we've done, point distribute, and give it a density of 50. Essentially what we've done here is we've said that this geo node needs to be distributed 50 with a density of 50 all over the grid that we created. Alright, but we're going to press shift A, attribute sample texture, connect this in over here, press new, let's rename this logo, enter, and now we want to take this that we've made over here, but we want to limit it to the UV area of the geonode. So we're going to click over here in our geonode, click UV maps, make sure we've got our UV maps name, Control C copied, and Control V paste. Boom. So we copied and pasted that, so we know it's 100% accurate. And then we're going to call this our logo. You can call this whatever you like, but you need to refer back to it. I'm calling it our logo position. We've basically created a new attribute in this result called logo position, right? And we want to copy this logo position, Control C, and paste it into the density over here. And now everything's disappeared. And the reason why, if we click over here, we actually haven't chosen a texture yet. And if you go into Google and you type in Nike logo black and white, choose this image. Do not make sure your logo isn't white, isn't black, because the way this texture node in Blender works, it basically puts nodes on all the white areas and make sure that there aren't any nodes in the black areas. Right, now that we know that, we can press open, downloads, and we'll use that logo. And if we increase the density to 500, you'll see that it's perfectly in place over there. We've got a beautiful Nike logo, numpad 7, which we are quite happy with. Alright, now we can select all of these, and what you might want to change this to poison if you prefer, and just give it a distance of 0.1 or perhaps 0.01. Let's zoom in just so that they're not touching each other, or perhaps 0.05. There we go. Or whatever maybe you prefer random. I'm going to leave it on that for now. We can select this, and press Control J. And click on Node over here, and we're going to call this logo geometry node distribution. And we can change the color over here if you prefer a different color. And we're going to make the font size 50. And then we're going to select this and all of this. And we're just going to move this back all the way over here. Next thing we want to do is we want these nodes, which currently are just halos, invisible. If you go to render view, you shouldn't see anything. See, it's all gone because we need to instance it first. But for now, we want this to bounce. So the first thing we want to do to make this bounce is press Shift A, attribute, and we're going to have to use some math. The most important thing to make something bounce is to use sine, which is algebra. So that's essentially what we're using here. But don't worry, we're not going to go crazy into algebra here. It's just a basic requirement. And the result we're going to call offset underscore POS. And we will just use the position. And then we'll say Shift A, attribute, math. Another thing we want to do is use an absolute. And we'll copy this offset, Control C, and I'll tell you what this does now. Click, click. This is basically saying that when this bounces, it's going to use the offset, but this absolute is this environment, which means it won't go beyond this red line that you see over here. So it's going to be bouncing up and down as if it won't go right through the whole time. That's what we did with this absolute over here. Next thing we want to do is press Shift A, attribute, math again. A lot of math nodes here, and I'm hoping you understand what each thing does. So the first one is the math required to make the bounce possible. The second one is to make sure that the bounce doesn't go below the red line, so it can look more natural. Now we need to add more math nodes so that this sign over here has enough information to make the bounce work. And actually we can press Control X. We're going to start off with a Shift A, attribute, separate X, Y, Z, call the first group our position, and now we need to name our results X, Y, and Z. We need to create attributes for it because they inherently don't exist. So we'll just type in POS for position underscore X. So we're saying position X, result X is called position X. POS underscore Y, result Y is called position Y. And then POS underscore Z, result Z is called position Z. And then we have to press Shift A, attribute, math, connect this in over here. And the only thing we want to affect is the Z-axis because we just want it to go up and down. So we're going to say, let's start off with position Z that we just created over here. And let's affect position Z, Control Z, by using the offset. So position Z plus the offset will give you our new position Z. So that should give the bounce effect. Then we press Shift A, we're not done. We also need to combine it back or else it's broken. And we're going to change this to attribute, attribute, and attribute. And once again, position X is X, Y is position Y, Z is position Z. And the last one is the final position or the outcome that we want. So we'll type in POS and we'll look for just our standard position. Now when we press play, it still doesn't work, and that's because we're actually not done. We still need to add, for example, we'd like these bounces not to be bouncing at the same time. Basically we want random timing so that it looks more natural. So we'll press Shift A, attribute, fill, we'll connect this in over here, and we can use a float. And we need to effect this value by pressing Shift A, input, value, and we'll connect this into value. But over here, we're going to press hashtag, everything is lowercase, FRAME. And what we've done is we say that this value is going to change with the frame, every single frame. We're currently on frame 32, so it shows 32. If we went to the next frame, it'll show 33. So that's what this is affected by. And we need to give this new attribute a name. So we're going to call this ran_time, because this is going to give random timing, right? So we've got that connected. And we're still not done, because even though we called this random timing, we've only told it to look at each frame and fill it automatically, but we actually haven't created a random attribute yet. So we're going to press Shift A, go to Attribute, Randomize, connect this in over here, and we can change this to Multiply, and we can copy this, Control C, click over here and paste it in here, or just if you see it there, it's fine. And we're going to put this on 0.08, and we're going to put this on 0.12, because it messes with the seed. At the very least, we've now created a, we're using every single frame. We're going to automatically fill this in, and the attribute that we created here for this float, so that the timing of these things is different, is called ran_time. And then over here, we're using the attribute randomize, we're using multiply, and we're saying between this variant and between min and max, these things should bounce at a different time. So initially they might start at the same time, but because some of them are moving slow, as low as 0.08, others are moving faster, as fast as 0.12, it's all going to look variant. And while I'm at it, we can quickly just click on this, because this, well, we should click on these two and press Control J and just give this a name, random timing, and give this a more interesting color and give it a better font size of 50. There we go. So it's nice and clear. And while we're at it, let's just grab all of this and just make it a little bit neater. I'm going to make this easier so that the font is always within there perfectly. Well, that's not correct. It's only supposed to be on these two over here. Control J. Random timing, color, random color, and font size 50. Something like that should be fine. But we can still select all of this. In fact, all of this only. Press Control J again. Give this a color. Let's make this blue. And call this bounce effect. Give it a font size of 50 as well. Click on this. Let's bring this, separate that a little bit. And what we also want to do is just change this sign to a float. If you did that, you could see the bounce. But obviously we're not planning to use a float. I just wanted to demonstrate that so you could see it. And now, so we're going to switch back to float, to attribute. And we need to change this to our actual random time. Sorry about that. And we should have a basic outlook over here when we press play, where it all bounces together. But one problem we're running into at the moment, from my perspective, it's all bouncing at the same height. And that kind of ruins it for me. So the way we fix that is we go to over here where we made attribute separate. We had apparent sign, which is the math to make the bouncing work. Then we had the absolute to make sure the bounce doesn't go past this line here. And then straight after that, before we go to attribute separate, where honestly these three things make the bounce happen, because we have sign, we need to do one more thing over here. Shift A, attribute, randomize. We have to randomize the height. So we're going to choose the offset position, Control C, and we want to randomize that offset position. And perhaps we want to have a minimum of 0.3 and a max of 0.6. And now when you press play, it's frozen. And the reason why it's frozen is because we need to make this multiply. And just like that, we have beautiful bounces. Just so that we know that what this does in the future, because we can always adjust this later. Let's press Control J and give this a name. We're going to call this random height. Let's give this also an interesting color. It's not exactly random, but it's random enough, especially the longer it plays out. Alright, next thing we want to do is, now that this halo gives the desired effect we want, we need to connect it to an object. So we're going to press Shift A, point, instance, and we can connect that point over here, and we're going to use the sphere. And I'm going to press numpad 7 just to view this from the top. And now we can decide, for example, let's quickly go to this over here, and just, if we increase the density to 1000, how would this look? To 2000. What happens if we make it random and make the density 500? 700. 1000. Okay, there we go. I quite like that. That's going to be the amount I use. And let's pause this because a lot is happening there. It's extremely dense. Next thing we want to do is select our sphere, put it in collection 2, click over here and change to our shader editor, press new, and we're going to run into this. So we're going to press Shift A, input, and we're going to use object info. I'm just going to search for object info. Boom. Shift A, in the converter section, we're going to use a color ramp, and we're going to connect random and color into here. We're going to switch to our color mode so we can view this in color. And I'm going to press plus and plus, and I'm going to make this one 250. Whoops, 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 0.75, 0.5, 0.25. There we go. Now I'm just going to choose the random colors that I like for this example. Now you could choose one color. I'm using this so I can have multiple random colors. Choose that. This is kind of a way to use this. In the previous tutorial I showed you what I did and it didn't pan out, and this is the way it's actually fixed, which is awesome. Now, for me, I'm actually going to make them all RNG. I just think it will look nicer in my view if they're all very similar colors. There we go. go. And this last one we can make red. Numpad 7. And then we can select this grid over here, press new. And yeah, let's delete that. Shift A. Shader. We're going to use a glossy shader, as you know, one of my favorites. Into the surface. Make it 0.3. Let's give this a color of blue. And in the render settings, one thing you do want to turn on is ambient occlusion, so we can see those shadows better. Maybe increase the factor to 6. Turn on bloom and screen space reflection. And next thing I'm going to do is press Shift A, mesh, plane. I'm going to make it 5 meters. Numpad 1. Zoom in. G to grab a Z on the Z axis. Just bring it down a tad so that it doesn't look like it's bleeding through. There we go. And I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode. 3 to choose face select. Choose this bottom face. Numpad 1. E to extrude. Z to lock to the Z axis. There we go. Something like that. -1. Then I'm going to press E to extrude, S to scale, and I'm going to hold it in shift and just decide for myself what I think is appropriate. Something like that should be fine, and then press E to extrude, -1. And what we can do over here is press Ctrl R to create a loop cut. Do the same like that. Ctrl R to create a loop cut. Press 3. And then we've got that like that. And well, first press tab to go into object mode. And let's sort out the colors for this. So we're going to select this grid. Go to the material settings and go here and copy that material. Then select the plane, press new, and paste that material. And then we're going to add a new color, press new, press tab, change it to emission. Let's make it nice and orange. Perhaps a darker orange. Give it a strength of 30. Click sign. Perhaps that's too overpowering, so let's give it a strength of 10. 10 is fine. There we go. And if you want, you can always press 2 for edge select, Alt, Shift, Alt, and you can select all these edges here. Press Ctrl B to bevel it. But it's going to be an issue because it's a different part to the other part. I'm just going to leave it as is. Cool. Leave it as is. And now you can just set your camera up to an interesting angle. Last thing I'm going to do is going to press Shift A, Mesh. Well, I'm going to press Tab to go into object mode. Shift A, Mesh, Plane. Numpad 1. G, Z, just bring it down to about here. Zoom in. G, Z. Something like that should be fine. S30. That should cover any scene that I have, and just give this a material. I'm going to make this black. There we go. Quite like that. There we go. We created an interesting geometry node, animation logo effect. Control Shift A, snap that shot in, select your camera, and then you can just press G and move. Oh, wait, hold on. Select this camera, press X to delete it. Select this camera, press G and just move it in place. You can always zoom in. Cool. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.